Now, for more on what all this means for the UK, Europe and the wider world, I'm joined by Jacob Kirkegaard, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Good to have you back.
My pleasure.
Now, Jacob, it does seem that these Brexit surprises just keep on coming. We even saw the British pound surge following the news of the court's decision. But what sort of impact do you expect this to have in the mid to longer term?
Well, I think in the mid to longer term, the fact that Parliament from the beginning will have a very direct voice in the timing, and also potentially, if it wants to, in detail what kind of goals the British government should have in these negotiations. It does, in my opinion, mean that the prospects for this sort of very hard Brexit clean break that some members of Theresa May's government have clearly been agitating for have gone down.
And why is that?
Well, it's because Parliament, it's very unlikely, in my opinion, that there'll be a majority in Parliament for an approach like that. Because it remains the case that 70% of Conservative MPs voted or supported Remain. And I think that a sliver of those probably will have the spine to vote against a hard Brexit. Doesn't mean that Brexit won't happen. It just means that the vision of a David Davis or other sort of very ideologically opposed to Europe have less of a chance.
Now, what about how this ruling is being viewed? Let's start with investors. Obviously, we saw that the currency surged, but as this uncertainty drags on, what's going to happen there?
Well, I think investors basically like the fact that, as I believe, hard Brexit is now less of a certainty. They probably also like the fact that the Bank of England today said that they're not going to cut interest rates anymore. But it's clear that, at least in the near term, there is increased uncertainty, because this is, first of all, the first time that the new, relatively new, British Supreme Court is going to rule on a very contentious political issue. We haven't seen that before. We don't know how independent these judges will be and how the institution will deal with, intense media scrutiny, etc. And the other element of uncertainty is that the prospects for a potential early election in the UK have clearly gone up. Because if Theresa May feels that Parliament is putting too many constraints on the government's freedom of maneuver,
right,
she might very well just call an early election. And who knows what that will bring.
Now, with that being said, Prime Minister May did set this March 2017 deadline for triggering Article 50 so that the UK could leave the EU, and she does seem intent on sticking to it. But what does this new wrinkle, what does that mean for that?
What it means, she has to ask Parliament to be permitted to do that. And Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can decide to say, okay, no problem, you go ahead in March, and there's no issue. But Parliament may also say, well, actually, what, we think you should wait another 6 months because we don't believe that the government is ready. Parliament may say, look, we believe that you should go ahead, but we demand that you have a goal that says you should stay in the internal market. So no hard Brexit. Or Parliament might say, we go ahead, but we want to vote yes or no, up, down at the end of the process. Or even, and this has been proposed already by some of the Labour backbenchers, have said, look, you go ahead, you start this, but the result is going to be put to another referendum. So there's a lot of options, but Parliament might decide to do this. And certainly, unless they wave it through, the timetable now looks very ambitious.
Now, what about the international community? We already saw that France is stepping up with this one-stop shop, really trying to angle its way in when it comes to trade. What does this mean then for potential competitors and trade partners for the UK?
Well, I think ironically, I think actually the UK, the EU, the rest of the EU's negotiating position may actually harden because of this, because they will think, okay, now Parliament is in control, and Parliament will be more susceptible to economic pressures and political pressures vis-à-vis the sort of overall UK electorate. Right. On the other hand, if this means that hard Brexit is less of a risk, then businesses are less likely to relocate. So, the French and their one-stop shop, there won't be as many catches for them as otherwise. So again, it just basically means that for the more uncertainty you have in the UK from this, obviously the more uncertainty is faced by also their partners.
And just quickly, if you had to make a guess as to whether this March deadline is going to happen, yes or no, where would you lean?
I would say no, because I do think Parliament wants a say in how this process unfolds.
Well, certainly something that we'll be watching. Thank you so much, Jacob Kirkegaard from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Thank you again.